the attention of my board members. I now call the June 25th, 2019 meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. Our first order of business is the adoption of our agenda. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor of the motion and the second, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda has been adopted. I would like to recognize the UNC Charlotte students who are getting their master's degree in social work. Would you all please stand and be recognized? And hopefully, once you're done, some of you want to stay in Charlotte and CMS can employ you. I also would like to recognize our aspiring leaders, interns who are here with CMS this summer. Would you all please stand and be recognized? Thank you all for what you do. I am going to depart from my agenda a little bit and give a moment of point of personal privilege to Ms. Erica Ellis Stewart. And Ms. Stewart, please know that you could be cut off at the mic.
All right, I will be brief. I promised our chairman that I would be brief, and thank you for this moment. I wanted to take a moment this evening to share with our community that I will not seek re-election to a third term on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education this fall. For the last 8 years, I've had the honor, the privilege, and the pleasure to serve the entirety of Mecklenburg County as an advocate for children, for their families, and for public education. When I was first elected to this board in 2011, can't tell now, but I was a 37-year-old mother of two children who were school-aged. As I sit here today, I'm smiling because I'm 6 days from my 45th birthday and literally an empty nester. I realize that it is time to allow others in our community the chance to serve through elected service on this august board. While I am not seeking re-election, I do intend to remain active, and for those of you who know me, I will remain very vocal as a member of our community, particularly as it relates to issues of education, mental health, and economic mobility. I plan to take some time to reinvest in myself by pursuing a master's degree and taking, and I do spend some time with the MSWs at UNCC. We'll have 2 interns from your group in the fall. I'll also plan to take on some new responsibility in my professional career. Over the last 2 terms, 8 years, I've been a consistent voice for equity through the disruption of disproportionate discipline practices, a call for increased rigor and expectation for all students, especially those who have been traditionally and historically underserved, and also in seeking to make sure that we have investments of new construction and replacement schools across our entire community, but particularly those that are represented and located in the Crescent. I've focused on ways to bring student voice to the forefront through student leadership and representation on our dais. We've had our 3rd student leader as a part of our board as a result. And I have continually advocated to ensure that we have improved systems throughout our system and that we push for more transparent ways to communicate to those that we serve. I recognize that our school system is far from perfect, but I also recognize that we have to continually strive for continued improvement in order to meet our mission of serving all kids with excellence. and also a sense of urgency. And as a member of this board, that has always been my goal. As my time of service on this board winds down over the next 6 months, December 10th, I will continue to serve with the same intention, thoughtfulness, hard questions, and grace. Sometimes grace tempered with a little bit of that you have witnessed over the past 8 years. I just want to say to our community that thank you for this amazing opportunity to serve over the last 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to a first reading. It's the retirement of policy CFD, school-based decision-making. I turn to Dr. Jones as chair of the policy committee to lead us in this agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, the item before us tonight is the first reading of the proposed retirement, interesting word, of policy CFD, school-based decision-making. As this is a first reading tonight, there can be no discussion or debate on the recommended change at this time. This policy change is part of our ongoing efforts to clean up our board policies. After review, the policy committee determined that policy CFD was duplicated in other parts of the policy manual and therefore is no longer needed as a standalone policy. This change was considered by the CMS Policy Committee on June 17th and was recommended for approval by a 4-0 vote. So, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Policy Committee, I conclude the first reading for policy CFD.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. We are now moving to our two public hearings. One is on revisions to policy JFAC, reassignments and transfers, and the second one is revisions to policy FF, naming facilities. And Mr. Battle, seeing that we have no one signed up to speak for either of those hearings, I would declare those hearings closed. All right, we now move to consent items. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent items?
Motion to approve. Second.
Before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this items for individual consideration? Seeing none, all in favor of consent items, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I now turn to the superintendent for some personnel.
Thank you very much. This evening it's my great pleasure to introduce the next principal at South Mecklenburg High School, Glenn Starnes. Glenn, would you please stand? I'm going to say a few things about you, and then you can introduce some of the folks who are with you, okay? So Glenn will be the next principal. He is currently in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Public Schools. He's been there since 2016. He is the principal at Julian Gibson Elementary, and he's been an assistant principal at R.J. Reynolds High School. He's also been an assistant principal at Andrew Jackson Senior High School in Duval County Public Schools in Jacksonville, Florida. He's been a district coordinator for extended learning in the Baltimore City Public Schools in Baltimore. He's been an interim principal and vice principal at the Options Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. He's also served at John Marshall High in the Richmond Public Schools. He's an assistant, has been an assistant principal at 21st Century Learning Project director and a teacher. He has his bachelor's degree from business administration and secondary education from Virginia Union University in Richmond, Virginia. He has a master's degree in educational leadership in K-12 administration and supervision from Regents University. Glenn, welcome to CMS. We're looking forward to your service. On the spot, but if you can name some of the people that are with you today, I'd be happy to have you do that, or we can have Steve help you out with that.
I'll let Steve help me out. Just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be appointed the principal of South Meg. My family's not here. My mom is a teacher, middle
they take your picture today? Did they take your picture today? It's a different grade. Okay.
Well done. So, one of the things that Steve mentioned is he's been now a part of probably 20 principal selections, and this is the first time that he can remember when the selection team came to welcome their choice. And so I want to say thank you to all of you for what you do each and every day. Thank you for your leadership in helping us make this decision. Thank you. I also have the privilege of introducing the next principal at Shamrock Gardens Elementary School, Trina Potter. Trina, would you stand up and be recognized? Has been the assistant principal at Shamrock Gardens. She's also been a Title I literacy coach at Huntingtown Farms Elementary School. She's been the program manager of the Bell Summer Program and a principal intern at Huntingtown Farms Elementary. She's also been a principal intern at Collinsworth Dual Language Academy. She has also served as a part-time faculty member at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. She has been a teacher at Ashley Park, Steel Creek, Greenway Park, Smithfield, and she has her bachelor's degree from Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee, a master's degree in elementary education from Wingate University, and another master's degree in educational leadership from Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Please join me in welcoming Trina Potter as the next principal. Trina, would you introduce your guest this evening?
I would be thrilled to introduce my guest, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd like to introduce my husband, Wayne. My sister and her husband are here. My daughter and her husband, and my son and his wife, and my principal, mentor, and friend, Sarah Reeves.
Well, knowing the example that Sarah has set at that school, tell your friends goodbye. You won't see them again for another year. So the next principal that I'd like to introduce is the new principal at Ashley Park, Jolene Adams. Jolene, would you please stand? Please welcome Jolene. Jolene has most recently served as the assistant principal at Walter G. Byers School. She has been a data analyst at E.E. Waddell Language Academy and at West Charlotte High School. She has been a teacher at Sterling Elementary. She holds her bachelor's degree in special education and elementary education from Plattsburgh State University in Plattsburgh, New York. She has a master's degree in instructional systems technology and curriculum and supervision from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Welcome. And Jolene, would you introduce your guests and family?
Absolutely. This is my husband, Scott Adams, and my beautiful daughter, Zoe Adams, and Dr. Watts.
Thank you very much, and Dr. Watts, thank you for being here. I know you have other places you could be, but you're sporting your new do, and I like it. So here we go. I like it. So here we go. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wilcox. We now move to our action item, which is recommend approval of the proposed Title I application for the 2019-2020 school year. Prior to entertaining a motion, I turn to the superintendent for comments.
Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Title I actually Federal Programs Executive, Kelly Price. Kelly will walk you through the application and ask you for your approval. And I want to thank all of you who came. We'll hold up until you get out, okay? Okay, Kelly.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the board. Thank you for allowing us to be here again this year to share the proposed 2019-20 Title I application with you all. I'd like to start off with the first slide and just share with you there are 3 numbers this year instead of 2. The first is our planning allotment for this current school year, 18-19. There is a revision to that number because we did get some additional funding throughout the year from the state through Title I. And then our current allotment that is planning for the 19-20 school year is listed there. If you take the difference between our actual revised allotment and our planning allotment, the difference is roughly $680,000. and $23,000. We do anticipate we'll probably get some additional funding throughout the year, this coming year, just as we have done in the past. And so that will narrow that gap. But the difference between our planning allotment for last year and this year is only roughly about $116,000. All of our allotments are based on census poverty data from the U.S. Census Bureau. They're always 2 years lagging. So this is based on 2017 census poverty. And I know that many of us in the education world, in CMS, in our community, don't feel that poverty is decreasing. But the numbers for families who qualify for services, and in particular, even in Mecklenburg County, those who qualify for nutrition support has decreased by about 1.07%, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. So we are staying in close contact with our partners at Mecklenburg County, especially those who support social services. On the next slide, you will see our served poverty percentage for the current school year. If you just look at the number to the right, you'll see that we are proposing to serve 62% and higher with our community eligibility provision multiplier. This year we served 59.2%. Not a great margin of error, but had we stayed at the same percentage we would have had to grandfather about 8 of our schools, and we did not want to put them in funding jeopardy. So in order to do that, we raised the poverty percentage just slightly. On the next slide, you will see our 80 Title I schools. We continue to serve 80. In the middle, just a reminder, we do serve the Thompson facility, which by the old ESEA terms is a neglected and delinquent facility. It houses children and youth who come from not only Mecklenburg County, but across the state and across the country, who have been severely neglected or abused and are in need of social emotional care as well as schooling. We also are required by law to serve any private school who has a student or students enrolled who would normally attend our Title I schools. And you can see those listed here, and a little bit more information about those on the slide where we talk about the funding for those. This is a very small font, I know, but this is all 80 of our Title I schools in alphabetical order. And I promise that we can provide you with a version that you can see a little bit better, because even I have the bifocals. So our next slide shows us changes to Title I schools for next year. So by changing the poverty percentage to 59.2, we will add Mountain Island Lake Academy. They have been on the margin of being served for the past few years. So I know that the principal and I have spoken several times, and she's very excited about this opportunity for her school. Grandfather status, as I mentioned, we still couldn't avoid grandfathering some of our schools. So you see Military and Global Leadership Academy, which is at Hawthorne, Cotswold, and Quail Hollow will be in grandfather status for next year. If they remain, if their poverty percentage remains high enough, they could potentially come back into status in the 1920 school year, or exit status. And then exiting status is Dilworth Elementary's Sedgefield campus, and that was anticipated with our student assignment changes. And so they've been prepared for that. They were grandfathered this year. We are required by law to set aside 1% for parent and family engagement. If you do some quick math, you'll notice that that number is a little bit higher than 1%. We are required to give, of the 1% that we are required to set aside, 90% to schools, which we do, and we reserve 10% to provide professional development opportunities for our family school advocates and our family contacts in our schoolhouse. And this year we're adding a Title I Director of Parent and Family Engagement, which will be under our Ombudsman office, under our Community Outreach Department, under LaTarja Henry. So you'll see that reflected here. And all the slides going forward, you will also note that we have indicated where we feel that even though these may be required set-asides, where we're meeting the goals of our new strategic plan in the district. Pre-kindergarten is an optional set-aside that we have had for many years. The only change you will see here is that we are increasing the number of classrooms from 109 to 114. And we did reorganize some of the central office positions to better meet our needs of our intake office. So we added some interpreter translators by collapsing some vacant positions. And that's the only change you'll see there. And then that indirect cost rate you see is the rate that the district is allowed by statute to take off of expenditures for the day-to-day operations related to the federal program. That includes building facilities, electricity, phone lines, water, all of that kind of stuff. So that's why you see that number there. Our private schools, here's a little more detail on the number of students that are attending each of the private schools that we serve. We have 100 eligible students for next year. Our two newest schools that we have not previously served are Oasis Performing Arts School, which is located on West Boulevard, and Union Faith Christian Academy, which is located on Providence Road south of the Arboretum. And those services that we provide are through Public Consulting Group, through tutorial services, and we do that in consultation with the administrators and the teachers at those schools. And we have a specialist who specifically works with those schools, attends those activities and the parent events and professional development that we also provide for their teachers and the activities we provide for their parents. Our next slide is professional development. We have over half of the new teachers in the district with 0 to 3 years of experience in our Title I schools. And so we continue to provide 6 new teacher support coordinators to provide support to those teachers. We tier that support based on after evaluations are done in the first round in the fall. We begin tiering that support to those that are the most likely to be successful and remain with us by the end of the year, and those who are having the most success with our students in our Title I schools. And we work with the other ones to either remain in the Title I school or potentially transition to a place that might work better for them instructionally. You may remember in the past, I think I just turned something off. I did, sorry. You may remember in the past we had focus and priority schools under the old version of ESEA, No Child Left Behind. Those statuses have simply changed names, so the old focus schools are now targeted support and improvement schools. And so those schools are schools that have a subgroup or multiple subgroups who received an F grade in the 2017-18 school year. We have 99 schools in our district who are in this status. They are not all Title I, obviously, because we only have 80 Title I schools. 97 of the schools that are in this status have students with disabilities as their primary subgroup. And so we have received supplemental funding from the state, and we're going to be providing a TSI Institute this summer in August, and then ongoing training through the fall and through the next year to support deemed homeless under the McKinney-Vento law. And so we provide social work services for those who have at or around 100 students. And you can see those schools listed there with the notation that the data was as of June the 12th. We also are required by law, all of the schools in this status and the status on the slide that you're going to see next are required to use the NC STAR platform as their school improvement planning platform for the upcoming school year. If you're not familiar with NC STAR, you can Google INDSTAR with an I, and you will find that we have simply just branded a platform that is used nationally for school improvement planning, but we are required to use that platform for these schools. And so we have a specialist who works with those schools not only to transition, but who helps to monitor the plans for the schools who are in this status. Our formerly priority schools are comprehensive support and improvement under the new law. And here again, we are looking at schools that are in the lowest performing 5% of schools overall in the state. And that means that they are either in low performing status by North Carolina statute, or they have a graduation rate that is lower than what is outlined in our state's Every Student Succeeds Act accountability plan. And those two schools with the low graduation rate are Garinger and Harding, and then the other schools are low performing schools. Again, we use some funding here to target the two schools that have the highest number of students who are in McKinney-Vento or homeless status. On the next slide is our homeless set-aside. This is not required by the federal government, but it is required by our state that we put aside at least 1%, or recommended that we put aside 1%. It is the only opportunity we have within the Title I budget to serve non-Title I schools. And you will see here that we provide for our homeless liaison, who supports all of our McKinney-Vento social workers and all of our schools and families who have a homeless status in the district, and works to address those needs either internally or with our Department of Social Services in Mecklenburg County. In addition, we provide McKinney-Vento social workers 3 under this set-aside to Myers Park, Vance, and West Mecklenburg high schools. Myers Park not being a Title I school, but having over 100 students who are in this status. Our students receive services through our after-school enrichment program and Freedom School Partners during the school year and throughout the summer. When the law was reauthorized, foster care students no longer qualified under the homeless statute or McKinney-Vento statute for services, but we made a decision in this district that those children were vulnerable enough to be served, and so we continue to serve them. We have about 3 students whose families have opted to participate during the year in our after-school, before and after-school enrichment programs, and we have about 10 students who are participating this summer. Some of you may ask why that number is extremely low when we have many more children in foster care, but foster care children do not return to their school of origin. They go to the school attendance area where their families live, and so many of them already have a network of service that they have for after-school care for their children. But we do have a liaison that works with the Department of Social Services who reaches out to any family and any child in foster care status and offers them this service, and she makes sure that we always know who they are and that they are enrolled if they choose to be so. We are not required to provide supplemental support to our English language learners, but it's a very large population within our Title I schools, and it's also a very vulnerable group in our Title I schools. So we have 2 very phenomenal coordinating teachers who work with our L teachers to improve instruction for our English language learners in Title I schools, and we have 5 interpreter translators who work to not only receive families in to our district and make sure that they are welcomed in a language that they understand, but also to provide support to our schools when they need interpretation face-to-face, over the phone, or perhaps written translation of a letter or some kind of correspondence that's necessary to get out to families in multiple languages. I am going to put a plug in here very quickly. We do have 2 vacancies, so we're looking for a Nepali interpreter, and we're looking for a Vietnamese interpreter. Those 2 positions are vacant, and we desperately need someone. So I know that Naja Trez, who's over our English language learner department, would appreciate it if anyone would like to reach out to me or to her regarding that. We did talk about serving Thompson. The amount set here is set by the state, and it's based on a head count that is taken in October. And you can see the number of students that Thompson serves in its educational program. The last thing I would like to bring up before we go on to the schools allotment slide is that this year we made a decision with the input of our principals to explore the option of using a substitute staffing service other than our own substitutes. When our teachers in Title I schools are absent, and there were more than 5,300 absences, full-day absences in the 17-18 school year, we have about a 40 to 45% fill rate when those teachers are absent. So that means that we have to disperse students to other teachers, which then increases class size. It also impacts how we serve our EC students, our L students, and other students who are extremely disadvantaged in our schools. And so what our partnership with Kelly Education Services will do is to provide substitute staffing where we have not been able to. They have previously worked for the last 3 years in our 14 Beacon schools that were previously designated as Beacon and had a success rate of between 88 and 90% fill rate for those absences. And they have committed that they can do that for our 80 Title I schools. And on this slide, you can see that we have provisioned for 1 year for them to meet that threshold. And if not, we can explore the option of having a competitive bid, potentially looking at another agency to support us in this area. But all of our Title I schools will receive their substitute staffing through Kelly and not through Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. So any subs that are employed there are employed, paid, background checked, incentivized, everything through the Kelly staffing services. The last slide is our district administration. We are allowed to use up to 12% for district administration. We've been working very hard over the last 4.5 years to reduce this percentage. We're down to about 9.7%, but there are just some costs that we cannot avoid. Obviously, there has to be staff to not only support our Title I schools, but to monitor for compliance. And then we also provide district staff to support our Central I learning community that you see there. To the box to your right, all of the salary and benefits are totaled for the staff that are on the left. We pay that indirect cost rate that you saw on the pre-K slide on all expenses that are paid out of the Title I budget other than pre-K. That's captured there. We pay unemployment costs that would normally be incurred by our schools or our departments where people have previously exited the district and have been eligible for and paid unemployment by the state. So we have to pay that bill annually in February, and we do that. And then operational costs may look high, but that is literally everybody's device that they have, phone. It's mileage reimbursement for all of the travel we do to schools, copier cost, anything you can think of that would be operational is included there. And so we hope to continue to reduce that set aside over the next few years. And finally, the good news is that even with a reduction in our overall planning allotment and looking very closely at our expenditures and looking very closely at carryover and how to monitor for that, we are able this coming year out of our allotment to give our schools, our 80 schools, the same amount of dollars overall, which is $18.5 million that we gave them in the prior school year despite taking the reduction. And so you can see that that's a benefit for our schools. Each school's allotment may look different because the school's allotment is based on the number of children in poverty based on our CEP data. And so the school's allotment may look slightly different, but the overall allotment that goes out to them is exactly the same. I don't have any additional, excuse me again, I don't have any additional information for you all regarding the Title I application, but I am here to take questions from superintendent and members of the board.
Thank you, Kelly. Board members. Okay, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you very much for this, and I appreciate all the varied ways that you're using these Title I funds. We know that they're very restricted. We cannot move those around to all parts of the county, and they have very specific uses, but I appreciate the innovation you are using within that, those criteria to kind of get the most bang for our buck. I do have a couple things, questions I think that the public would like to know. I know that we have a variety of positions in our school sites that Title I funds. Could you just give me a list, just several things just off the cuff here on what types of positions those are?
Yes, very quickly. So of the, I'm going to go back to this slide, of the $18.5 million that our schools receive and spend each year, 67% of those dollars go directly to positions that either support children, support teachers, or support students directly in instruction. Those positions include 21.5 facilitators for this year, 48.5 teachers, 5 coaches, 131 Success by Design differentials that we pay to teachers who teach and also coach in our schools, 3 Success by Design positions, which are directly teacher positions, 30 teacher assistants, 75.5 BMTs, behavior management technicians, 3 counselors, 14.5 tech associates, 20.5 family school advocates, 8 interpreters, and 56 tutors to support our students.
That's a lot. That's a great variety. And I'm assuming since that figure is going to stay the same, that we're probably not going to change those numbers drastically within our schools, sort of keep that same.
Numbers do not typically change overall. However, our schools really look, first of all, at their ADM allotment first, because if that changes, they look at how many positions are given through state and local funds. And then the second component is our schools we're always working with them through that school improvement planning process to look at where their data needs might best be met through a position. So you may have a school that in 1 year they need an additional second or third grade teacher, but they make a decision that based on their data the next year that they don't really need the teacher position because their ADM is sufficient, and so they add a counseling position. What we've seen the most increase in since the flexibility was added about 2 years ago is around our Success by Design positions and being allowed to use Title I funds to pay those differentials, so that teachers who take on the extra duty of not only having students they're responsible for, but staff that they coach, has been highly successful. So you will see some variance in the numbers, but overall they stay the same. But schools do choose their positions truly based on the data.
Okay. Also, I think on page 11, maybe page 12, the targeted support, the comprehensive support. Did you say that that's a new piece of?
It is a new nomenclature for the Every Student Succeeds Act.
Okay.
The targeted support and improvement schools were formerly focus schools, and how they get into status did not change.
Okay.
And then the comprehensive support and improvement schools were formerly priority schools, and their status of being the lowest performing 5% in the state did not change as well.
So our approach really has not changed with those with that change in nomenclature. I know you mentioned there was some academy or some training that our folks are doing with targeted support. That's been consistent over years.
Actually, that was 1 year funding that we received from the federal government, from the state through the federal government for this upcoming year, and we're partnering with and Dr. Ansall, Dr. Ann White, in the Exceptional Children's Office and her team, to implement professional development series for our school leaders and teachers in our school. So each school will have a TSI team that are people who are already part of either their school leadership team or their instructional leadership team, who will work to help receive that training and then help us translate that over into staff meetings and into what happens with the school improvement planning process.
Okay, that's helpful. Also, I'm just really interested to see how the Kelly services work out, and hopefully we will be at 85 to 90% filled. That's certainly a big improvement over 40%. So, crossing fingers on that.
Okay, Ms. Byers Bailey.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on the Kelly services that you just mentioned, because I was very impressed with that fill rate myself. Could you and that when we use Kelly services, you, as you said, you're using Title I funds to help pay for that. Considering that fill rate, why is it that we can't use Kelly for all of our substitutes? Could you explain that?
Yes, ma'am. I'll try to be brief. So the Kelly services cost, let me go back to that slide. The Kelly services cost you see here, the $1.3 million, is basically the service charge that Kelly charges us to recruit the substitutes, to train the substitutes, to background check the substitutes, to incentivize substitutes to come into our schools, especially if there's a last-minute vacancy. So the district still has to use its state and local dollars to pay the base sub rate, whether it's a certified sub or a non-certified sub. And so it would be cost prohibitive or Sheila Shirley speak more to that, but it would be cost prohibitive based on our analysis to do it for all of our schools. And also, we felt like going from 14 schools to 80 schools was a good measure of whether in our community, with the availability of employable people who would be eligible to be substitutes, would be deep enough to serve more than 80 schools. So we want to give them the opportunity to show us that they can do that for the 80 most needy schools, and then potentially we could look at, depending on the budget, certainly expansion beyond that. But the problem is that once we expand beyond our Title I schools, we would no longer be able to use Title I funds to support our Title I schools, and so then we as a district would be responsible for using local funds to cover the entire cost for all of our schools to receive that service, because it would then be supplanting. So that's why we did it to only Title I schools this coming year.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to focus in on with respect to Kelly, there are some Title I schools that have dedicated subs. Could you explain how that was handled with respect to Kelly Services?
Yes, ma'am. So we are meeting again with Kelly Services this week. We have a 3-hour meeting with them, but we have already spoken to them about this. So I will give you one example. Cochran Collegiate Academy. Rachel, who is the principal there, has a very strong cadre of subs, and she was concerned about losing them. So Kelly Services, their local team, is setting up a meeting with every one of our schools, and then those substitutes who have been provided through CMS substitute services are being offered the opportunity to transition to Kelly. Nothing about there being a sub under Kelly is changing. They get the same rate of pay, the same benefits, the same everything, but they have that choice. And so in most of the cases where they've had meetings, pre-meetings so far, Lincoln Heights Academy is another example, Turning Point is another example. Those subs are dedicated to those schools, so they are transitioning over. We do have a few subs that have opted to stay in the CMS pool because they already serve both Title I and non-Title I schools, and they want to continue to be able to serve across the county. They're not dedicated necessarily to one particular school. But that's how we're addressing that, and we're offering them, Kelly Services is offering them incentives to come and stay, and then we are also tagging those subs in the system so that they are prioritized for the school for which they have expressed a preference, for which they have been serving in the past under our substitute staffing service.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Alice Stewart.
Oh, we're talking about Kelly Services.
No relation to this, Kelly.
No relation to the excellence of Kelly Price, of course. One of the things I want to know, I've gotten calls over the last couple of years just about our use of Kelly, and I think while we're talking about them, this is a great opportunity to clarify qualifications of the folks that we utilize through Kelly. Could you speak to that just briefly?
I would have to defer to our HR folks for the specifics, but what I can tell you is that they have to meet the same standard as our substitutes that we currently hire. So, for example, again, certified sub rate would get someone who has a teaching license who is considered a certified teacher but is not currently employed full-time. Perhaps a retiree, someone who's moved into our community who does not want a full-time job but wants a substitute. And then the non-certified subs go through a very rigorous background check, same as all of our employees, drug testing, and the rate of pay is just slightly different. It's about averaged out, I'll round it, about $25 difference in actual pay between the non-certified rate and the certified rate per day. But that's really all I can speak to as far as the specifics of the employee themselves. I will say that Kelly Services provides some very rigorous training for for their substitutes that they're providing. They partner with us around curriculum. They partner with us around student behavior support. And in order to address the needs of schools like Lincoln Heights and Turning Point and other schools with large populations of students with disabilities, they have a special certification track. It's not like a teacher certification, but it's a certification track for their subs who work specifically with our exceptional children. And then they also are working on another classification of substitutes who are allowed when students require physical assistance, mobility assistance, who can actually provide that assistance and who are trained in the proper way to do that, just as our staff would be trained to do that.
Thank you. I think that, so I know I've had questions over the years as we've used Kelly, as we're increasing our use, particularly with our Title I schools, if we could articulate that broadly to community members, particularly in areas where we've had concerns, I think that would go a long way. While we're at the back of the presentation, I'll just kind of work my way around. You had a slide where you talked about two schools in particular, Garinger and Harding High, that those schools are on the list primarily because of their CIS low graduation, CSI low graduation rate. Do you or Dr. Wilcox have any sense of when we can anticipate those schools getting to the requisite graduation rate to be able to come off of that list?
So what I will tell you is that any school that was designated this year by the state in either targeted support and improvement status or comprehensive support and improvement status is in that status for 3 years, regardless of the progress they make towards, if they're low performing, getting out of that status, or if they have low graduation rate, regardless of that status. In addition, all of our CSI schools receive a supplemental school improvement allotment of funds to support their initiatives towards meeting the goals of either a low graduation rate, to raise that graduation rate, or to get out of North Carolina low performing status.
So I think it's great that there's a kind of a 3-year buffer zone. Hopefully we will again have a sense of urgency around it, particularly for those schools because they've been in an interesting spot for a while. So if maybe offline we could get some data about the trajectory around that, hopefully faster than the 3-year period, that would be great. You had mentioned that we were adding, I think it was 5 additional pre-K classrooms. You know where those will be located?
Yes, they are all going to be housed at University Meadows. So we did do some shifting around, so it's not an addition of classes, but we just made sure that all of the pre-K classes at University Meadows were Title I pre-K classes, and so we were able to shift some of our non-Title I pre-K to another site. So it's not an addition. We are not adding 5 new pre-K classes to the district. We are moving 5 pre-K classes that were previously on another funding source, but they're regular Title I. They should have been Title I funded, so we just shifted them over to where they should be on Title I funding, and then we consolidated them at University Meadows.
That's an important clarification.
Yes.
Thank you. And my very last question, I think it was on slide 3, where you talk about our measurement around poverty. I know that it's gone up slightly, it will go up. And as we continue to see more an expansion of poverty in our community, where do you anticipate that percentage will land in future years?
We have consistently modified our served poverty percentage because of census poverty decreasing in Mecklenburg County and across the state. So we've consistently lowered our poverty percentage to serve, but we've not made huge changes over the years. We've gone from 72 to 68 to 67 point something. I'm sorry, I can't remember the previous year. 62 and now 59. So not significant shifts, just enough to match that number that I mentioned earlier, where you see about a 1+% change in overall poverty data. And so we really, it's an adjustment for that. Now next year's allotment will be based on the 2018 census data, and then the following year's allotment will be based on this year's census poverty data. So if our poverty overall in the county, which is indicated by our partners in Mecklenburg County, continues to decrease, we will still have to shift just slightly to continue to serve the schools that we have, or we will have to make a decision as a board, as a community, and as a school system to exit schools from status.
Okay. Ms. Dashian?
Well, that worked out to be a perfect segue to my question. So it's just this update. Thank you for this update. Thank you for all that you do. It's such a sophisticated job to follow the incredibly intricate federal laws for how Title I funds can be spent, and then to use that money as effectively as possible and stretch those dollars as far as possible to serve the children that we serve. This annual report really gives us a glimpse of what's going on in our community, and I do think it's fascinating that there's a slight downtick, 1.0%, 1.07% decrease in poverty for the according to the 2017 U.S. Census data, and yet I just think it's important to highlight to those that are viewing that the latest numbers here are for homeless children, 4,342 homeless children. That's on slide 13. And that's probably an undercount because I don't think every family either is willing or even is able to raise their hand and say, we're not sure where we're going to stay between one night and the next. So that's probably an undercount. And that includes even, people have a certain view of Myers Park High School and schools in that region. 106 students experiencing homelessness who attend Myers Park High School, as well as 100 at Vance, 89 at West Mecklenburg. So those are just high schools. So I just thought that was worth repeating for our community to hear.
I would add very briefly that census poverty data is different than the children we serve. So census poverty data, the way we receive our allotment for Charlotte Mecklenburg schools is based on Mecklenburg County census poverty data. It only looks at children ages 5 to 17. The first thing we know is that we serve children who are under the age of 5 in our pre-K program. We also have a few students who are over the age of 17 who are still enrolled in our schools. In addition to that, not all of the children ages 5 to 17 attend a Charlotte Mecklenburg public school. We have children who are in that census poverty data, whether they are high SES or low SES, who attend private schools, who attend public charter schools, who are homeschooled, or who may go to districts outside of our own, outside of the borders of Mecklenburg County. And so we have to be mindful of that it's measuring all children. So you have to think about the areas of Charlotte where poverty is not as prevalent, and so those children are captured in that poverty data. And so that does impact Mecklenburg County's overall view of poverty in what's considered a decline in poverty percentage, because you're looking at children only in a certain age range, but you're looking at everyone in Mecklenburg County, and we don't serve every child in that age range in Mecklenburg County. So if that's a point of clarification that helps you or the community, then that's a bit of information that we don't generally share, not because we're trying to hide it, it's just because it's usually not asked.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. What are some of the specific services that a student would receive that's attending a school that is not considered a Title I school, and how do you ensure that student is receiving those services? Say, for instance, a student at Myers Park High School that is homeless. What kind of services do they receive, because they're not a Title I high school, and how do you ensure that they are getting those services?
Well, that is why we have a homeless liaison. So we are required by law to have someone who is our liaison for homeless students in the district under the McKinney-Vento Act. And so that person in our district works in our student services department. And so we have a strong partnership with, again, Mecklenburg County Department of Social Services. So we are required every year, just to give you a background very quickly, we're required every year at the end of the school year throughout the summer to look at the rostering of every child who's considered McKinney-Vento or homeless. And we have to determine by legal standards whether or not they still qualify. And coming into the school year, our numbers are usually in the 2,000 range, and they continue to rise throughout the year because students continue to come and fall into that status. So we do have a mechanism. So overall, as you saw across the slide, we have 10 McKinney-Vento social workers. Those social workers are not only assigned to their specific school, but they also provide leadership and training to other social workers in the district who are not McKinney-Vento social workers, which means that their specialty is not homelessness, it is social work in general, so that services are provided in those schools as well. And our McKinney-Vento liaison, because she's paid out of the homeless set aside, which allows us to serve Title I and non-Title I schools, is all over our district when it comes to providing service to wherever there is a call or question of need. And actually, there's a small sub-grant of dollars that she receives that's additional under the McKinney-Vento Act. It's $75,000, which is used to provide a support person for her so that there is always a continual flow of the requests for services that we have. And then we have regular check-ins through our Title I specialist in the Title I schools, and then we work, she works with the homeless points of contact in every school. Every school is required to have, every school that has a homeless student or students is required to have a point of contact for those students in the building. And if they don't have a social worker assigned to that building, it can be a counselor or someone else who liaisons the services for them.
Okay, so that student is touched by that homeless liaison person.
That's correct.
And what services are provided other than that person talking to them?
Educational services are provided through the school, which are whatever services that non-Title I school is able to provide through its allotment of positions or funding. Most of the services for those families and their children come through our partnership with the Department of Social Services. So we liaison with their social worker, their assigned social worker, and then we help with transportation to get them to appointments, to meetings that they need to go to. We work to get services brought to the school site itself, if at all possible, for them to sign up, say, for SNAP or TANF, if they can't get to a location where they can do that. So, and for any homeless student, whether they're in a Title I school or a non-Title I school, we are required by law, and as a district, we do meet the compliance letter of the law. We provide transportation to the school of origin. So if you are designated as homeless and your school of origin is Elon Park Elementary School, but you are currently living in the Walter D. Byers zone, we counsel with the parents to make the best decision for the child, but if the parent feels that the best educational choice for the child is to continue to attend Elon Park Elementary School, then we transport back to Elon Park Elementary School as long as they're in status, as long as they're in that school grade band.
Thank you. I thought that was very important that the public heard what those services are that we provide for the students who are in non-Title I schools. Thank you so much. And seeing that we don't have any more questions, thank you for this report. And we're going to bring forth a motion. Motion to adjourn. That's what I was saying. The motion for Title I. We're going to have a motion.
I can't make the motion. I can only encourage you to please approve the
right, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Very unanimous. Thank you, Kelly. We now move to our reports and information items, and I call on the superintendent to present the next set of reports set forth on the agenda. And the first one is the report on budget amendments for May 2019 and June 2019.
As presented.
The next is a report on capital project ordinances for May 2019.
As presented with a comment.
All right.
These reports are really to make sure that the board is aware that if we seek your approval, we can begin the funding of our summer sustainment projects and some of the other security projects we have in mind. The rationale being that we may not know for a bit yet when we'll have an operating budget because of the uncertainty in Raleigh. We just want you to know that's why we're bringing these now.
Okay. We are. All right. Thank you. Without further ado, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor of the motion, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. We are adjourned.